Welcome down to the Swab with Georgie Carroll. We all know nurses have the best stories, so why don't you come have a listen? Welcome down to the Swab with me, Nurse Georgie Carroll. We're going to be talking to a Bradley Chesham. He's a nurse who has nursed in every continent bar one, and that's quite impressive. I'm never quite sure which continent I'm in and when I'm in it. So I'm going to be sounding quite stupid when it comes to geography. Even hemispheres, I get the hemisphere right about half the time. Does anyone else have that, where just things that are very similar, you have to really think about which word it is? North and Southern Hemisphere, they're two that I struggle with. My family love that I have to think before I decide if there's a lion or a tiger on the screen. It's just one that it's never come easily to me. I have to just take a second to remember which one has stripes and then say it. And unfortunately, seeing as I'm in the medical field, benign and malignant are two that I really have to stop and work out whether to pull a happy face or a sad face when we're told in a handover what somebody's been found to be. So, like I said, we're going to talk to Bradley Chesham, aid worker, army nurse, goddamn hero, who has now branched out into a career that I didn't even know was part of nursing. So this is going to be a great episode, people. If you've got any people who want to come on the episode, can you please welcome to the podcast Bradley Chesham? What are you up to right now, Bradley?
I'm literally just finishing a whiskey, so we're going to do okay, Georgie.
Why are we just finishing a whiskey? Let me make it clear, listeners. It is 8:45 in the morning. I'm proud of you.
Well, yeah, I just got out of the hammock, so you know it's a reasonable thing. It's not unreasonable.
The hammock. Is that what you sleep in?
I was sleeping in the hammock, and then my alarm went off, and I went, oh shit, I've got to go. Me and Georgie are having a chat.
Yeah, nice.
Yeah, no, I just finished a night shift, and it's about 26 degrees outside. I'm up near Noosa, so it's bloody beautiful. And I'm just having a wee dram before we have a chat.
Well, our listeners are from all around the world. You should also know this. Brad is a war nurse, or was a war nurse. Is that what we call you, war nurse?
Nah, definitely not. I'm a male nurse. Bit of a wuss, but I've been to Iraq and I've been to Afghanistan.
Yes.
The term war nurse is so masculine for me. I'm not that tough, but for that title. But yeah, I've been to a couple of wars.
Which one would you be in MASH? Do you even know that? Who would you be in MASH if you're in MASH?
Do you know, my parents watch MASH, and I used to hate it that much that I don't even know one of the characters' names.
All right.
Yeah. Sorry,
but it used to be one of my favourites.
Because I was only, I never really got into it. But I did some stuff. I seen some. I stood next to one of those Predator drones. It's literally like the same size as a Cessna plane. They are the most intimidating things to stand next to.
A Cessna drone. What does it even do? What does it do for a living? A Cessna drone.
Oh, no. So it's a Predator drone that's the same size as a Cessna plane, sorry. But so it's an unmanned plane that basically is weaponized. So no one sits in it. It's like a massive remote control plane that kills people.
And are they on our side or on the other side?
Well, they're on, the western side when I was in Afghanistan. So I was doing okay there. Wasn't coming at me, thank the Lord.
But occasionally they get it a bit wrong, don't they?
Mate, occasionally, yeah. But I did sit in a Apache helicopter, and while I was there, I met Prince Harry. He's a good fella.
I think he'd be a good fella.
Yeah, I was queuing up for a curry, and he stood behind me, and g'day, Harry, and we had a quick chat. He seemed okay.
So he was really there. He wasn't just there for a photo op. He actually did things and queued. He has to queue for curry. I like that. Yeah,
well, he's a captain, I think, and he's a navigator in the helicopters. So he worked out of the. I think he's Navy because he's Army because the Apaches were Army, and the MERT team was the Chinooks, medical emergency response.
I'm going to pretend I know what a Chinook is. I know all these words, and I know they would be
the Chinooks are the cool ones. They got the two rotors, the bigger sort of.
Oh, yes.
Yeah. They're quite quick, actually. But, anyway, met Prince Harry, had a curry. That's what I did at war.
Yeah. Right at the cutting edge there, eating the curry.
Yeah.
So how long, what year did you start to be a nurse? Let's start with that one. We always find out where people come from.
Yeah. I came, mum gave birth to me. No, I'm only kidding. I started nursing probably about 14 years ago now. So around sort of popped out of university after studying wine, mind you. So I just fit straight into nursing.
Very compatible, those two. And like you said, you are having a post-night shift whiskey.
Yeah. Single malt from Scotland for the viewers up there. But I did, it's people work, isn't it? Hospitality, nursing. It's the same, just different, sort of different business. But yeah, 15 years ago, I'd say, I studied in Sydney, popped out of university, did a bit of cardiothoracics, mainly sort of heart lung transplant stuff. And then I think after about 2 or 3 years,
you've never been one for a boring job, have you?
Yeah, I've been talking about this with my psychologist about
because cardiothoracics is pretty gritty. For those of you that aren't medical listening, that when you see on the ER when they crack open a chest and all that shit,
it's proper juicy. Yeah, because you get someone back from theatre, and even the lung transplants, because they get like a clamshell, so it's not like a little zipper. It's like they just peel it up. It's next level. But anyway,
so you sat there on an already exciting job, and you think, "Oh, this is not quite exciting enough for me."
Yeah, I'm gonna
go war.
I'm gonna go over the pond, and we went over to London and went to a little place called Harefield, which is the weirdest. It's just outside of London near Uxbridge, and there's a heart lung transplant centre there. When people have heart surgery, they go onto a bypass machine, and one of the surgeons in Harefield there, he was one of the first guys ever to sort of think of this idea of supporting people's hearts. And he actually hooked a kid up to a baboon. So the baboon... Yeah, Google it. It's the weirdest thing ever. So I don't know.
So they're both alive, obviously, right?
Yeah, at the time, yeah. So the idea was that he wanted to do surgery on the heart. So he needed to stop the kid's... I'm sure it was a kid, the kid's heart. So the idea was to hook it up...
a kid because it couldn't tell anyone.
Yeah. And then... the poor old baboon, he was just eating bananas and didn't know what was going on. Next minute, he's getting cut up and hooked up to a kid. And then...
Would you know what vessels are hooked up to what there? Or were you just overtaken by the kid versus baboon?
I'll be honest.
It's a little bit like Mad Max, like when they
I'm
give
not
the
up
blood
to speed on
transfusion to the
baboon
breastfeeders.
anatomy. But
Yeah.
but anyway, this guy was obviously, imagine doing something like that in modern medicine now, the uproar. But
there'd be issues.
Yeah, well, you think there wasn't issues then? But he paved the way. Now cardiopulmonary bypass and ECMO is all built on the principles of this sort of perfusion support out at Harefield. So, yeah, I'm
glad you learned all that there. Anything but anatomy, you learned about all the other stuff. That's so cool. Yeah, so you're in Harefield. Just on like a little exchange program or something.
Yeah, pretty much, typical Aussie in London, popping over to France, popping over to Berlin.
I've got to point out, mate, you absolutely took up the London accent. You sound not a jot of Aussie.
Yeah.
You sound like Harry.
Yeah, he's a good fella, but I don't know what he's doing over in America. But I don't know how I've got the accent, but people before I left said I sounded English, so I don't know. Maybe it's my mum and dad's fault. But
you still do.
Yeah.
So go on, you're over there and...
doing cardiothoracics, and then I got sick of that because it's pretty repetitious in nursing. You do valves and you do bypass and, over and over and over and over. And if you're not doing transplants, it can be a bit repetitious. So I decided to do a bit of trauma. So we moved into town because Harefield's a bit of a pokey little village. It's a nice place.
Never heard of it, yeah.
Yeah, out near Rickmansworth, sort of in the north. But went into town, went to UCLH and Royal London proper in Whitechapel. And while I was there, because they do trauma, I started to think, I like this trauma. So if I want to do trauma, what should I do? And I thought, I can go... at the time it was sort of 2011, 2012, and the Afghan war was still kicking on, and they were recruiting local nurses to go because the British military were a bit short of ICU nurses. So next minute, here I am out in Helmand province.
Did you get it first go? Because I know a few nurses who've tried to get in the military for nursing.
Yeah.
And been knocked back for one characteristic or another. Not usually the nursing skills. It's usually some kind of character flaw, like they're not good at giving direction or...
Yeah.
You just got in.
Great question. So what actually happened is I tried to go, I didn't get the job. And what they ended up saying to me was, well, I can't, there's no job on this tour, but we do have a job in northern Mexico. I was like, oh, okay. So, and then here I am. Next minute, I find myself in this little place called Matamoros, which is on the border of Mexico and Brownsville. And little did I know, it's probably more dangerous there than it is in Afghanistan. So, I get on this boat, and a couple of teenage boys are hung off the bridge as we're heading out to the Gulf of Mexico to do some work with a party that works in the oil and gas industry. The night before,
as in hanging from the bridge.
Yeah. So there was a nightclub. Someone chucked a hand grenade into a nightclub the night before we arrived, killed a couple of people. I've never been that scared in my life, to be honest. We weren't allowed out at night. Mexico wasn't my favorite place. The town we were in was outright bloody terrifying.
How did they prep you for it? Did they tell you that that's what it's going to be like? Or like, because if I joined the army or the military and they said you're going to Mexico, I'd be like, what? Why are we there?
Yeah, they prepped me. They said, oh, here you go. It's this much money a month. Are you keen? Yep. Okay.
Good money.
There we go. Bingo, you're in. There wasn't a lot of prep for that job, to be honest. That wasn't that great. But then, so the thing is, because once you do this sort of austere or conflict zone or even sort of remote wilderness type work, it's like a chicken or the egg. Once you get one job, then 50 jobs come your way, but it's really hard to get that first job because obviously there's a bit of a skill set that you need in terms of, it's not even nursing, it's probably more life experience about sensibility and situational awareness, being in a dangerous situation. Because, I worked in Africa as well. We're in Guinea, the capital city, Conakry. And, you get off the plane and your guide, can't see, but I've got like, apostrophes there. My guy, just this fella just rocks up and takes all of our passports, and there's rolling blackout.
Oh, no, I've watched Bang Up Abroad. I wouldn't let anybody take my passport.
Yeah, we had no choice. So they took our bags, took our passports, rolling blackouts. So the airport terminal while we're waiting for our bags just kept going pitch black, and just sort of this level of trust that, all right, well, it turned out to be okay. But you do develop a certain skill set for those scenarios and you bond with your team quite well.
Like you said, you got one job and then like others pop open. So then it's like a smorgasbord of where do you go? How do you pick? Do you want something incredibly purposeful and meaningful, or do you want just somewhere you've never been before? Or
yeah, well, I think once you sort of think about global healthcare delivery. So in the meantime, I'm an ICU specialist. I've done my master's at Anglia Ruskin, which is up in Cambridge. It's focused on ventilation. So I've done all this acute care. And then here I am popping to Mexico, going to the Barents Sea up in Norway, going to Africa. And then you sort of think, well, hang on, like an organization like the United Nations have probably got hundreds of projects going on all at once. And those projects need nurses. Like that's what they do. They deliver supportive healthcare to governments. And, people have maternity leave and people have sick leave. So there's all these contracts just within the UN, let alone, the International Red Cross or all these other NGO type organizations. So once you scratch the surface of that type of industry, there's actually gazillions of work. And then it comes up to, what level of mortal risk do you want to go and find or adventure to, because when I was in Mosul, Iraq, that was balls deep in ISIS situation. That was a situation I never thought I'd put myself in, but we were...
Let's stay in Iraq for a little bit. If you're comfy there, let's stay in that. This is incredibly intriguing to somebody who's not been in ISIS-riddled areas.
I got dropped off in Erbil, which is a city in Kurdistan, which is pretty, I wouldn't say it's Western, but, there's high-rise buildings and there's a bit of commercial business there. And we drove 2 hours north, and on the way there was piles of dead bodies on the side of the road. So before I even got to work was jaw-dropping.
Yeah.
Yeah. And then...
a little bit in your head knows that you're going to war.
Oh, yeah. Right. Oh, yeah. I think because when I went to Afghanistan, I was at Camp Bastion, which is one of the largest forts in known military history. At times there was sort of 15 to 20,000 people in this fort. Like it wasn't like a little camp with some temporary walls. This thing was like a city, like there was Hercules planes flying in, I think they fed something like 5,000 people every meal. And, it was like you're in a city. You never really sort of had direct, immediate, mortal threat because we walk around in Western world, and that's not something we generally think about, like that we're at risk. I'm actually a registered nurse in Papua New Guinea as well. And a place like Papua New Guinea the violence is quite spontaneous, and you never really know what's going to happen. And that level of stress when, I visited the local hospital and there's a nursing school at the back, and they were telling me that, sometimes the girls get raped out the back. And I was like, what the fuck are you talking about?
Yeah.
And that is a really wholesome thing to really understand, is that people, we take that for granted in a way that we operate in this world where we turn oxygen on and oxygen is available 24/7, and we probably waste hundreds of thousands of dollars worth of gas every year. Whereas some of these other countries, oxygen continually runs out. So Iraq was a good one because it really was an ability for me to sort of go, wow, this is it far and away was the most humanitarian thing I've conducted. And if I wasn't there was scenarios where people would have died. Like we had a kid airstrike, a wall fell over.
So yeah, like I don't think most of us really understand who you're nursing in this pop-up city. So you're in this pop-up city, so it's not just like the news makes out. It's not just America and England and Australia in this. No. So all the allied countries, what do we call it?
Yeah, well, so in Iraq, I was with the World Health Organization in a damage control hospital. So we were just outside the city of Mosul, and there was about 20,000 civilians who were pretty much held hostage by ISIS. And so they'd set up booby traps. They'd pretty much decimated the city. And, if we had civilians that would come in through whatever reason, most of them were underweight, so sort of 35 to 50 kilos because they hadn't been fed, hadn't had access to food. I looked after a couple of girls who were exposed to chlorine gas, which is a weapon of mass destruction from World War I and World War II. And, some of the things we seen and I did it's pretty crazy. And when I was there, the Iraqi government actually attacked and infiltrated Mosul, and it was when it was liberated. So it was a pretty crazy time.
I interrupted you when you were talking about a kid that you had in. It was only because in my head I imagined that in these cities you're just bringing back the soldiers and fixing them. I forgot that you
absolutely not. No. So I looked after very few soldiers. So because it was a World Health Hospital, in actual fact, I looked after quite a few ISIS soldiers as well. So we'll go to the kid and then we'll talk about.
Let's go to the kid.
So this kid's probably about 18 months old, and a wall's fallen over, and it's got a collapsed lung, and it's blue limp in the bed. And I walk into this sort of resus situation, and I've just walked in just like, oh shit. And someone hadn't turned the oxygen cylinder on. So they're trying to resuscitate this kid, and everyone's so stressed out that they just didn't turn the oxygen on. And I've turned the oxygen on, and the kids turned pink, pretty much immediately. And I just thought,
oh, hallelujah.
If I didn't walk in and do that, that kid would have been dead. And just,
it was always that easy, mate.
Yeah, mate. But just simple little things like that, because in those circumstances, it really is just a matter of applying, like just being there, so.
And you're working with nurses from all over the world,
including Iraq.
Yeah,
absolutely. Yeah.
So Iraqi nurses working there as well.
Yeah, and to this day, the evolving part of the story is I've developed my own business, which is a virtual reality business. And actually just recently I've raised some funds to help build a virtual reality lab at Mosul University for the nursing faculty, for the nurses that I used to work with, who are some of the most inspirational people that I have worked with, because they put up with shit that, a bunch of Aussie nurses would go to the union about, they are a great bunch of people. So yeah, still keep in contact with them, which is cool. And then, so the ISIS soldiers, let's get back on point. So yes. you'd have, a male present, trauma type injuries, maybe lacerations or covered in concrete dust or something. And, might be anywhere from 17 to 30. And if they were of reasonable weight, then you could pretty much count on the fact that they'd be an ISIS soldier, because they've, obviously get food.
Right.
But because it's
not something that somebody outs about themselves.
No. But
okay.
Yeah. When they present, the thing is, because we did have local Iraqis working there, is they obviously hate ISIS, right? But it's a World Health Hospital. So It's the only time in my career when I've ever actually thought about human rights on a really sort of succinct perspective, because there were certain circumstances where the doctors would do the ward round and discharge a couple of these patients. And you look and think, where are they going? They need to go to theatre to get their wounds washed out. And it turns out the doctors have done a deal with the local Iraqi military and basically given them a ring on their little private mobile and discharged these people straight into the Iraqi government's hands for torture.
Yeah, now we're on human rights, aren't we?
Yeah, so you sort of think, hang on a minute, did that really happen? Or, and you don't really know because they're talking in local, and you think, is that, no. And then we had, it's a little team meeting, so what's, and there's, no, he's going to go home, we have follow-up, he's going to get that dressed, and I'm like, oh, goodness. Dear. Yeah, so.
Yeah, that must hurt you, your nursey heart.
Well, it's not, it's just those experiences that you're never going to have, you just sort of think, wow, that's pretty out there. And it's, I suppose, just how you apply yourself to your job. I know a lot of nurses have worked in places like Uganda or, South Sudan, or where there might be a little bit of civil conflict. And, how do you apply yourself to certain scenarios where, the local politics are completely, you just have to remain neutral to certain scenarios. Like in South Sudan, one of the guys I worked with was saying that he was a physician from California, and he had a guy present basically saying, oh, my wife can't get pregnant. He sort of said, well, that's okay. Why don't you bring her in tomorrow and we'll have a chat. And he came in the next day and she was 13 years old and he was 50.
Oh.
So, like.
Different world.
It's just hardcore. Yeah. But, it took me about a week for my blood pressure to get under 200 when I came back from Iraq, even though
listening to it, mate, I'm sat here just feeling like the most stupidest person in the world, because I wouldn't even know where to start on any of those ethical questions.
But, at the end of the day,
if he wants to rob that 13-year-old girl.
Oh, mate, it just drops the draw. But, come on, you can't be naive. It's a big world out there, and there's a lot of shit that goes down. And usually nurses and doctors are at the front lines of that shit in a way, like that's what we do. Like there's a couple of documentaries about Medicine Sans Frontier and some of the doctors that work in that service. And, if you're in Yemen or some of those places, people really do get pushed to that psychological point where they're providing care and doing the best they can in a really, really shitty situation.
Let's go back to the bit where you said you need to be a certain skill set, not even nursing, just a certain person. Like, you can't just want it. What do you reckon makes up a good
I think you have to have a psychological position in your own personal world where you want to achieve something for some type of purpose. I was sort of striving, and I still do. I want to sort of taste the world and do different things. And I do that in my personal life. Like I've lived all different places, and, I think, you're not going to be, you have to be a certain personality type to want to put yourself in those, pretty 50-50 circumstances.
You sound very together. Are they generally very together people who go out these places? Like if you do rural and remote we had a remote nurse on, and she says the ones that go in the touring around the very remote parts of Australia are usually missionaries, misfits, that kind of things.
Yeah,
people, really quirky characters.
Yeah, well, to be fair, you rock up a bunch of nurses, they're all going to be on the booze, aren't they? But no, I think, you get a mix of them. There's probably people who are just under the radar, going to the mines for some good money. Yeah, I think people, if you're doing that kind of work long term, you've got to question why are you not sort of just being a normal member of society? Like I couldn't do it my whole career. If you're doing that, it does take a psychological toll if you were doing that for years to
How long is the contract?
They're all kind of different contracts. You could do 6 weeks, you could do, 3 months, and then they go on site. It depends on the visas of the country that you go to. Like if you were in Iraq for, I think it was more than 6 weeks, you had to go to Istanbul, renew your visa for a week and go back again for another 6 weeks. So it depends on what country and visa requirements and all that kind of thing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So And are they well kitted out, these hospitals? Have you got what you need?
Yeah, like the oxygen runs out and the lights go off every now and then, and it's 56 degrees and you sleep in a like a box with mice. But it's reasonable, Georgie.
So I'd say you've got what you need then.
There's no single malt at 8:30 in the morning. That's for shiz.
Yeah, is there like a social life to it? Is there a
Yeah, for sure. You definitely bond. That's one big thing coming back from London when you leave a big ICU. There's like 40, 50 staff on the one shift, and you all walk straight out to the pub after work, and you bond. But in Australia, everyone's got to drive, and you don't really. Well,
we do a lot of drunk driving in Australia.
Yeah,
it's
mate.
a thing here.
Yeah, but I do find after work it's harder to have that connection with your staff at work. But definitely when you're in an austere environment, it's part of your situational awareness to know your team. Like when I was in Africa, we landed at the airport and we got to the hotel, and I'm pretty sure in Conakry there's not too many 4 or 5 star hotels, and when you get to the foyer there's a lot of prostitutes milling around for the Westerners, and we obviously got the heads up and steer clear and straight up to your room, and we're out the next day. And I actually went out into a boat, and we 100 kilometers offshore, and 3 or 4 days later one of the boys on the boat knocks on my clinic door. I say, "What's up, mate?" He says, "Oh, I think I might have AIDS." And I said, "What do you mean?"
I think I've got.
And I said, "What do you mean?" He said, "Oh, he's one of the mechanics, and he's in the workshop, and he's got this rash in his groin." And a few of the other boys looked at it and told him that he had AIDS. But it turns out that this guy slept. He had a threesome with 2 of these prostitutes at the hotel, even though he was told not to. And
I suppose if you want to do it, you're just going to do it, aren't you? But I would say I wouldn't know. Well, I know it's a blood test for AIDS, but I shouldn't imagine you can tell it by a rash in the groin.
You absolutely cannot tell AIDS by a rash in the groin. And
I don't know what kind of care he thinks he's going to receive in your room.
Oh, mate, put your groin away is pretty much what I said. But I did burst out laughing. It wasn't the most professional thing, but he had a bit of heat rash, and the boys in the workshop were just taking the piss. But
he had a bit of crotch rot.
The emphasis of this is that this chap actually rang his wife and apologized, and it turned out that he had a bit of a mental health crisis. But when you're in a team and you're in a really austere environment, is that everyone is a really key player, because if someone gets wobbly, the whole team gets wobbly. And that is a really strong attribute of when you're isolated, but can become the weak link, because if people need something, or even if someone becomes unwell, then how you perform under stress, or how you perform as a team under stress becomes really interesting.
I suppose this is why they send you off to Mexico first.
Yeah, well, fuck. When I was there, I had a supply ship. A guy went into AF and had chest pain. I had to get the US Coast Guard to fly out, pick him up. That was, these little stories, I'm sure I'm going to have a heart attack by the time I'm 50, because the level of stress that I've had.
Maybe not. Maybe now you've come back and life's pretty...
Georgie, I got 2 kids under 2, and I run my own business.
Oh, right, yeah. No, that's worse than Mexico.
Shit's got real.
Shit's got real. How do you even meet? I presume you've had these babies with a lady.
Yeah, 20 years we've been together. Yeah.
20 years. Oh, right. So she's been with you. Oh, right. I totally imagined you were like a bachelor type Harry who just kind of swanned around. Go on. How do you meet a lady in these conditions? Yeah,
no. So we met when before I even started, when I was studying wine. So we've been together a long time. So she, I don't know how she puts up with me, but she
what does she do?
She's a radiation therapist. She does like cancer therapy type work.
As a medic or as a nurse or like?
Yeah, well, it's a title. It's like a radiographer. She's, rather than being a diagnostic radiographer, she's a therapeutic radiographer. So she uses radiation to treat cancer. People have chemo or they have radio. So she does. Yeah. She's like a sort of like a technician that delivers the radio.
I'm sure it's very sophisticated. I've never worked in it. It all seems like guesswork to me.
Yeah, well, radiation physics, pretty much guesswork. That's what Marie Curie said. I'm sure it was.
It just seems so random that whenever I go near it, I'm just like, oh, just remember to double bag everything with the chemo. That's as far as I get with
Yeah,
cancer
yeah.
treatment.
Yeah, if they pee on the floor, just put a bluey there, leave it for a week. We got this.
Yeah, so like so you're traveling around all this time whilst in your relationship with what's her name?
Haley.
Haley. All right, so and then at some point you two decide you want babies.
Yeah, so we left London about 5 years ago and came back. We live near Noosa now, up in Queensland.
For the
Um,
Aussies, that is like a beautiful, like you imagine Australia would look like. A lot of Australia doesn't look like what you imagine Australia looks like. But
yeah, no,
Noosa's pretty bang on it. It's beaches,
it is.
big
It is the
leafy.
business. We like. I just went for a walk this week, and there's whales out there. See a couple of turtles. It's 24
Oh.
degrees in winter. It's
I almost don't believe in whales. The amount of times I've gone whale watching and not seen whales, I'm like, is this like a drop bear thing?
You come up here, Georgie. We'll have a whiskey at 8:30 a.m. and I'll chuck you on the back of a humpback.
Yeah,
Yeah,
that'd be cool.
yeah.
So yeah, and then you've got two under two.
Yeah, so we popped out a couple of little midgets, and just so happened that when we had the first one, for some ungodly reason, as a nurse, I thought I might start a business, which is, it's probably the most
Well, you can
psychotic.
still travel, can't you? But it just becomes certainly mums have a thing where once you've had the babies, you can become a little bit less daring. Like
Yeah,
I wanted to be a stuntwoman when I was younger, and then when I had the kids, I couldn't even stand on a table to change a light bulb. So like you've got this thing where if I die, who's going to look after them?
yeah.
So has that kind of changed your world whereby you won't be traveling to the dangerous places anymore
No,
whilst they're little?
no, no. So we planned to go.
Yeah,
I wanted to go to the US for a year or two, but this whole pandemic thing hasn't turned out too well. Um,
yeah, I wouldn't go there now.
yeah, so
Give it a rest.
we're just sort of mapping out next year, and I think because she's on maternity leave and she can have a second year maternity leave, so we're sort of mapping out that we might head up to Catherine and travel down Western Australia and spend 6 months in Margaret River next year.
Oh, you're gonna be, like, on a bus together? You're gonna be on, like, a camper van?
Well, it's pretty good in Australia. Some of these rural remote jobs, you get a little house and you don't even need to bus it.
I'm looking at remote at the minute. I've applied for a couple.
Yeah, no, they're
I
pretty
need
good.
I need adventure, mate. I'm getting bored of the hospital. I don't need a war.
Yeah, I
I do
think
need an adventure. But all of this means that you started setting up your own business. Let's talk about the business before we sign off. Like you never heard of this either. Virtual reality nursing. In a nutshell, if you had to explain it to a toddler, what is it?
so. It's nursing education, but we use new technology, which is like headsets, to give nurses different experiences. So, for example, the easy thing is like in the 90s, they used to have those overhead projectors, those big clunky things where you turn the lights down and you project
Eh?
it onto the wall. But now with these headsets, you can, if you were doing something like, I don't know, ECGs, I can give you a headset and you can literally walk around inside the heart. You can hold the sinus node. You can walk through the valves. You can pull the muscle
Did you
apart.
invent this? I know you didn't invent virtual reality, but did you invent that nursing could be taught through this?
Definitely wouldn't say that, but I've probably one of very few people internationally that apply it for education. There's a few companies that make products, but they're sort of like techie companies, whereas I'm a service company. So in a classroom teaching people. So I've been doing that for a couple of years and won a couple of awards from America, and I've been an invited keynote speaker in Europe a couple of times. So yeah, probably doing
So
something
cool,
a bit
man. So this
different.
is, and like you said, you've brought this back to help the people in Iraq, the nurses in Iraq
Yeah,
that you
yeah.
said
So one of my
maybe.
partners that I work with is HTC. So they're a telecommunications company out of Taiwan. So they just earn about 20 billion a year, but
What's
they
that?
they specialize in VR. So they've been amazing, the Australian branch, and they helped donate some technology, and I pushed it out and talked to the
So
faculty.
they got the technology, and you've got what people need to learn.
Yeah, so I'm pretty much like a subject matter expert in sort of being able to link nursing with the technology is probably the easiest way to describe it. But,
You're a very exciting man, Brad.
Yeah, well, I'm tired.
Do you feel exciting when you sat with your toddlers watching the Wiggles for 4 hours? Does
Yeah,
that kind?
he's there. He's sitting with your kids. There's nothing better, is there?
Well, yeah, I've got teenagers now. They don't tend to sit with you.
Yeah.
One of them got his first job this week. So he applied for a job at McDonald's.
Oh, yeah.
And he didn't tell me. He just texted me, have I got a passport?
Yeah.
And I thought, where are you going? And it was because he needed a passport to show his employer. And he's done one shift and he believes he's got burnout.
Yeah, well, fair enough. It's like a rite of passage being at Macca's. I remember my ex-girlfriend used to work there, and I worked at the cinema at Greater Union, and it was like, how many people could I let in for free? And then we'd all go to Macca's afterwards, and how many people could Susan, my ex, feed afterwards? And I think my record was 35 and hers was over 20. So we weren't doing either business any favors.
No. So this has been an incredible chat, mate. I haven't spoken much because you just had so much. Things have happened. Do you know what I mean? What an exciting.
It's probably just my
career.
delirium from night shift that's just oozing out of it.
Where were you working last night? Emergency.
Yeah. I was up at Nambour Emergency, just half an hour west of where I am here. Little.
Nambour sounds like it could be somewhere really exciting, but it probably isn't.
Look, the people there are great. Not a lot happens. It's just a little country town near the beach, but good team, good little health service. So yeah.
Do you know what I think people's questions will be when they, if they're sat there listening to this? There will be lots of people out there going, do you know what? That sounds like me. That sounds like something I could be. So where do you suggest they go? Where's a good, comfortable employer in this world health side of things? Is it Medicine Sans Frontières? Is it Red Cross? Is it military?
I think people need to sit with themselves. I meditate on this a little bit and understand what it is that they really want to achieve, because I think a lot of people in nursing don't know what they want to do when they grow up. Like we get given these career paths like research, education, or management, and they tend to make me nauseous just thinking about this sort of fixed pathway for your career. I've always felt like a square peg in a round hole with nursing, because I've never felt like I want to conform, but maybe that's just me. But if you think about what it is you want to do, a friend of mine's just about to fly out to Bangladesh and work at one of the biggest refugee camps in the world. And you sort of think to yourself, oh, that sounds pretty amazing. And you think, oh yeah, they've got the highest rates of dysentery, crime. So you got to really sound it out with yourself about what you're walking into. Because if you've never done a job like that before, it can be extremely confronting, because they're not going to...
I don't think that Bangladesh one would be a starter role.
No, but there's a website, Bundle of Rays is a good website. That's my company's website.
That's yours, isn't it? So Bundle of Rays. We'll tag it in.
Plug that in there. So if you want some nursing education, go across there and sign up. It's $6 a week, and we provide skills training and distribution. But if you want a job and you want to have a bit of a look at the world, there's a website called reliefweb.org. And essentially on there, they sort of provide jobs that help supplement UN projects. So you could be like, project manager at an AIDS clinic in, Rwanda, or, those type of jobs. So there's some pretty cool jobs on there, research posts in different countries. And you don't have to go anywhere crazy. You can, there's jobs in Nairobi and, nothing too
there you go, people. It's Relief Web, and the other one is Bundle of Rays.
Yeah, get on that second one.
Bradley, it has been phenomenal talking to you. Next, I work in the country towns of South Australia with leg ulcers at the minute, and yeah, I don't think I'll be able to keep my soul alive inside after hearing those stories. But yeah, maybe I'll bump into you in the outback. Maybe you're up in Broome or whatever. Thank you so much for talking to me today. Thanks and goodbye.
Yeah, no worries, Georgie. You take care.
You've been listening to The Swab with Georgie Carroll. That's me podcast, but I also have live comedy shows too, and I've written a book called Off the Charts. If you want to know more about those things, please hit me up on my socials. I've got a Facebook called Georgie Carroll, and I've got an Insta called Nurse Georgie Carroll. I've got a website called georgiecarroll.com. Also, if you've got anybody that you think would be a great guest on The Swab, I'd love to hear from you. Thanks again for listening, and that's all for today from The Swab.